Brewing Conversation, live from Nicaragua. Dive deep into the world of coffee with co-founders of Twin Engine Coffee, Andrea Wolverton and Colin Ganley.
Welcome to Brewing Conversation, Season 0, Episode 7. My name is Andrea Wolverton.
And I'm Colin Ganley, and today we're talking about something that I don't know how we're going to squeeze it into one episode, taste and quality. And the best way to start, that I think is to start this off, is the question of, do you want to go an inch deep and a mile wide, or do you want to go profoundly deep in something? And an expert knows one thing very well, and they don't just have a superficial knowledge of everything. And coffee, I was in Pittsburgh a few months ago, and I went into a coffee store, and they had a beautiful, amazing display of sort of the coffees from all around the world. They had a barrel from this place, a barrel from that place, and you could go around and scoop different coffees from different places, and they all had different aromas, and they had pretty little signs on them. And being a coffee professional, my first reaction was, yeah, but are any of these any good? Yeah, it's cool that you've got Jamaican and Ethiopian, and you've got Nicaraguan and Hawaiian coffees, but did you get good coffees from those places? And I think that concept of going a mile wide but really just superficial into coffee versus what we do, which is we only have coffee from one or two places, but within those places there's such tremendous depth of quality, tastes, terroirs, that we can provide just as many coffees, but a much richer experience by only taking the truly distinct, high-quality, pure coffees.
It's time for my local anecdote, which I think will explain this. And I'm doing it in my smiling voice. You tell me that you can hear smiles.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes, you can.
So the funniest thing is when I come back to Nicaragua and I'm trying to talk to people that we work with about coffee and like how people outside of Nicaragua, outside of where coffee grows, think about coffee, because like many Nicaraguans, virtually very few people that are drinkers have ever actually seen a coffee plant grow, right? And so I say, did you know that when you go to, well, I guess Pittsburgh or wherever you want to go to, they are drinking a lot of coffees from different places. And the people I'm talking to will be like, what? Like, you mean like, because only here you only drink Nicaraguan coffee. And right. So it's this, and a lot of different coffees, but it's this really funny concept to someone who lives where the coffee grows, that where the coffee does not grow, they would be drinking coffees from different places. And they're like, well, do they visit those places? Do they know it? They just don't understand the concept at all. It's hilarious.
Yeah. It's a funny thing. When we were starting the company, we were trying to think about what does it mean. And because we came at this business from our own backgrounds, my background was in, one of the things that I really have enjoyed is creating products that you consume. So whether that's food, alcohol, premium cigars, what have you, it's, for me, the idea of achieving that highest level, the very best of what you can produce, was extremely compelling. And is really,
my background's like the effects of those products.
Yeah, well, your background lends a lot more to it than just that. But I think for this part, I think that for me, that was very motivational. Like knowing that we were embarking upon this endeavor to try to not only find the best producing farms, but then within those farms, find the best tasting coffees within them. And in some cases, take a coffee from this farm that has a really chocolatey, rich taste, and this other farm down the road that has also defect-free coffee with a hint of citrus, and blend those two together at a certain percentage to create a truly world-class, remarkable coffee. That was really motivational for me.
Right. So if we talk about these taste and quality, well, first we're going to talk about what is taste and quality, but being essential to our success. I mean, effectively found ourselves in uncharted territory.
Right.
People say you're a specialty coffee company, coffee roaster in Nicaragua. So we had to think, okay, like what can we do well? Because what we can't compete with is economies of scale and being right in front of people in the coffee drinking country. But what we can do is find, like you're saying, like find coffees that almost no one ever gets to taste in a pure form, because coffees are blended to get to a lower price point. So what I've seen when I travel abroad, the coffees in the pure form are selling, if you extrapolate out, I mean, they're selling for 30 or 40 bucks a pound, all of them, which would be starting with like our estate. So it's quite a value. So we could create quality for value, and really connect with nature, and just like our new packaging with the triple shade, like exactly what trees, exactly what animals, this kind of connection that you can't get unless you live here. And there's virtually, I was trying to count, I need to actually just find this, but there's no other 100% specialty coffee company doing this in Nicaragua that is available in the US. And so there's very, very few that are roasting at origin. So
yeah, I don't think we want to name who they are, but there are competitors out there in the marketplace that offer coffees that are of the same quality from farms very nearby to where we are. And those coffees are all offered at what you were saying, $30, $35 a pound, etc.
Or more. I mean,
they're very exclusive. Yeah. I mean, and then of course there's no comparison for the Maragogipe that we have for the Elefante. No one has anything like that.
Right.
But we do try to keep everything at a really very, very fair price, like really reasonable, kind of cheap actually. I mean, almost half price compared to what it would be at some of these other stores. But this notion of taste and quality, it's when you're in the farms, there's a lot of theory about what creates great tasting coffee. Obviously, you want to sort out any coffee with defects. There are lots of things that you do, but there's kind of a spiritual side or a mythological side or a hypothetical side, which is that the terroir, the other plants in the area of the microclimate,
the ecosystem,
the animals that live in that area, as well as the more obvious things like the soil makeup and the slope of the hill, etc., and altitude, these kinds of things that most people talk about contribute. And so one of the things we wanted to do, because we're here and we know everything about the coffees, is we wanted to share that with everyone who drinks the coffee. So as an example, on our box for the Honey Bear coffee, we put on one side a picture of the porcupine. The porcupine lives in the area where the coffee farms are, amongst other areas, and we provide on the side of the box just a little bit of information about the porcupines that live there and how they interact with the coffee farm. Then on the other side, we put information about the canopy, the shade under which the coffee plants grow for this coffee. And so our coffees all grow under what we call a triple canopy, which means basically 3 layers of trees. There are the short, fast-growing trees. There are the middle-sized trees, which are typically fruit trees. And there are the really tall trees that take a long time to grow that provide this sort of top-level shade. And so, for example, on the Honey Bear box, we say that this coffee grows on the low side, banana trees, in the middle height, the mandarin or orange trees, and on the for the tallest trees in that particular area, it's the coral tree, which is called the bucaro in Spanish.
I mean, in the spiritual side, so that is the scientific aspect, but there's nothing like going to a farm and picking a handful of soil on the coffee slope and feeling it, because the farmers that are our partners, they love it. It's in their blood, their families. And so you're talking about many tens of years of that terroir being developed. And so it becomes very spiritual. As you're walking around and you hear the noises. And so, when you talk about ecosystems, it really changes when you're in the place and what that feels like, and the gleam in the eye.
And it's not all romance either. I mean, these are all choices. I mean, which trees are planted around the coffee plants and things like that. They're all choices. They take a long time to develop because those medium and tall trees take years or decades to get tall enough to actually provide any
right.
shade.
So a producer as an agronomist is a real. I mean, it's quite important actually, or whether they're trained agronomists or if they just have learned in more of a practicing approach. But I mean, it's a choice to let certain leaves fall. And so you see the leaves being combined back into the soil. And so this triple canopy isn't just a marketing idea. It's actually creating the soil that the coffee's growing.
It's part of this mysterious cocktail that is the terroir that you hear about in French wine, or in really wine anywhere. That word's been adopted pretty widely to explain the unexplained cocktail of factors that go into creating the taste of the thing. And the thing that we didn't really mention is also the seed variety or the varietal. So we utilize Bourbon, Caturra, Maragogipe, Catuai, a number of different types of coffee, more than just that, in our different coffees in order to create those tastes. And it's that concert between the seed variety and all those other factors that ultimately determine what's going to come out in the cup.
And so this is key for us because, I mean, this generic single origin concept that, just kind of names where it's from, it names, the farmer and in the coffee drinking countries. And so we're really, a key to our success is to go farther than that because that's what we can do here because we are directly working in the country. And so we can get smaller lots. We can be very specific with defects. We're not beholden to what they call American preparation or European preparation, which allows for different levels of defects. So primary defects would be things that are kind of hot in the news these days about molds, et cetera. And so we don't have any issues with that part of our defects in our green coffee.
One of the simplest examples I give people to illustrate a primary defect is imagine you've got coffee growing on the hillside and the coffee seed, which becomes what you drink in your cup of coffee, grows inside of a small fruit. And that fruit is obviously very attractive to animals. So if an insect, for example, comes by and starts eating the fruit and gets to the seed, that will affect the taste of the seed. It will stop the development or injure the seed, and that will create a bitter or off-tasting coffee.
Yeah. And over-fermentation. So these kind of defects are what fundamentally affects the cleanness of the cup, as you say, which would be blended in different to lower the price of the green coffee in general.
And so we have 0 primary defects in all of our coffees because we want to deal with the pure taste of the coffee, sort of at its height. What is the best example of this coffee? So we eliminate all of those and sell them on to other coffee companies that can.
Right. So secondary defects would be more like the carrot that I think they're calling them imperfect produce that has nothing to do with the taste, but much more of a physical characteristic. And so the minimum requirements for what we're using are what Specialty Coffee Association would call specialty coffee. But because we live here, we're actually able to have more stringent standards and then just get a wider variety of interesting coffees that represent Nicaragua.
And this was partly because of the passion that we wanted to put into our coffees and into this company, but it was also a bit strategic because it's hard to go into the marketplace with an average coffee and then tell people how different and special you are. And so one of the ways that we wanted to let people find us and be unique and special is to truly be unique and special in the best way possible. And so the best way possible for us was, if you're just talking about the coffee itself, forget the packaging and the marketing and all that kind of stuff. Just talk about the actual thing that goes into your coffee filter. The best way to put your best foot forward there is to focus hard on it and to get zero primary defects coffee, to work with the farmers to figure out which region of the farm is producing different tastes of coffee, then taste them, decide what we like ourselves, and put that out there and really be able to stand behind it. And that's how I don't want to talk too much about outside organizations and things like that, but that's how we've been able to be Cup of Excellence winners for our coffees and earn various accolades from different organizations, is because we just, on the bean level, before it comes to any of the communication stuff, at the bean level, we're laser focused on finding what's best here in Nicaragua and presenting that to the world.
And to me, pricing has been an interesting animal because when one looks at specialty coffees that are available roasted outside of Nicaragua, they're pretty expensive and there's no indication of quality. Okay, this was grown here. This was grown by this person. This was grown in this country. But there's actually no indication of and then there's usually some tasting notes, but nothing objective about the quality, yet the prices, I think, are relatively high. Of course, they have overhead. And so it's interesting, friends have asked who would consider themselves wanting to really learn about specialty coffees and say, well, why does this cost that? And what it's often reflecting is the cost of living in that country. And so we've really been trying, because we're also selling Nicaragua, so we have to try to keep these prices comparable so that, because of reflecting because of transportation, et cetera. But it's been interesting to me to try to understand how to price, because if you price your coffee, what I would like to say is that we have the biggest value in specialty coffee in the market. But how do you also communicate that it is of that quality? Because people have been, I guess the market has been taught that, oh no, you only need to buy in 200 grams and that needs to cost at least $12. If you look at some of companies who use our flagship coffees as like a similar coffee as their reserve. And so trying to figure out this balance, which we're still there trying to figure it out. Working, it's in progress.
I think partly you and I like to get a deal, and so we like to offer a deal as well. I think that is kind of why we haven't priced our coffees high, even though our two reserve coffees could certainly sell for $40, $50 a pound, but we only sell them for $16.99 and $19.99 a bag. And it's not because we couldn't charge more, but it's really because we want these coffees to get out there. We want people to be able to drink them. We don't want it to be an unachievable luxury. That's not to say that we won't have some rare thing that we release that's really expensive because it costs us a lot to do it. But for the coffees that we have, we can produce a reasonable amount of them and maintain the prices that we've got. And
pay well. This is not to sacrifice any part of, and that's what's interesting, because there is, a different cost of living where the company lives. And so by living here, we don't have the kind of overhead, as much rent, et cetera, that is being charged in urban areas in other countries. And so we are able to produce at a more reasonable price without at all sacrificing, well, except ourselves, of course, we're the owners. We don't get much paid vacation these days.
I think the other aspect of quality is still related to taste, but slightly a different topic is packaging. Not how it looks, but how it performs. And also transportation. These are not the things that people normally talk about in coffee. They typically talk about like the bean and...
Right. Well, and the concept of freshness from the farm. Right. Which is part of this transportation, but keeping it... So normally that part is already determined for a roaster outside of Nicaragua. So they get what they get, and it's been handled the way it's been handled, and they have no control over that. And so being able to control that does change in the cup. It's not, normally when we talk about freshness, people are talking about roasting only, and they're not talking about
how the coffee was cared for.
How the coffee was cared for from the very first picking, because they just don't have any access to that knowledge, and so they can't talk about it.
Right. Often a coffee that's purchased here will go in a shipping container and go up and sit in a warehouse in Cleveland through the winter. It'll get frozen, unfrozen, etc., and it'll lose some of its taste. Whereas what we try to do, or what we do, is from the farm, the coffee comes here to our roastery, and we keep it in hermetic storage to lock in all the oils and all the tastes of the bean, to really make sure that when the person drinks the coffee, it hasn't lost what it has. Because the taste of coffee is created at the farm. The roasting, all you can do with roasting is ruin a coffee. You can either maintain all the great stuff that was put in it by nature, or you can damage what was put into it by nature. You can't improve upon it. You can't add anything to it. And so what we do is keep it in hermetic storage, roast it fresh, and then air ship it to the final destination. Unless it's in Nicaragua, then it just dries.
Right. So at the end of the day, quality, well, I guess taste, let's talk about taste. I mean, just kind of as this final note, is really about understanding, being able to taste, to sample, to say, oh, this is interesting. This is this varietal with a different curing style or from a different region, which is just virtually unheard of in the coffee world and in the specialty coffee world. And so being able to do that. So of course that means that we don't have that one coffee from that one obscure country in the world, but we do have obscure coffees from Nicaragua, that being able to taste one, having a variety, having a whole line of coffees that represent one farm, one varietal, one style, and we knowing exactly what went into the bag is pretty rare.
It is. And we could probably go on for hours about this, but let's wrap it up. So thank you for listening, and we'll see you on the next one.
This has been Brewing Conversation with Andrea Wolverton and Colin Ganley. Thank you for listening. For more connection to coffee and Twin Engine Coffee, go to twinenginecoffee.com or email us. We'd love to hear from you.